Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Melinda Nusafora. President of the United States, Donald Trump, shocked the international community and many within his own administration when he announced US troops would start pulling out of Syria. The Commander-in-Chief said Daesh had been defeated, so it was time for soldiers to come home. He broke the news just days after Turkey announced it would launch a third military operation in northern Syria, targeting PKK affiliate, the YPG terror group. But on Friday, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan confirmed he would delay this latest operation for now. The move would avoid seeing the two NATO allies pitched against each other. Washington considers the YPG its ally in the fight against Daesh and has had troops stationed in northeastern Syria since 2014. This latest operation will be to the east of the Euphrates River, where the YPG controls swathes of land. President Erdogan says the removal of the terror group from his country's borders is vital for national security. It's not the first time Turkish troops have confronted the YPG on Syrian soil. It carried out Operation Euphrates Shield in 2016 and Operation Olive Branch earlier this year. So what do all these changes mean for Turkey's fight against the YPG and its relationship with the United States? Joining me to break it all down is Selim Atalay, who is a journalist at 24 TV. We've got Dr. Marwan Kabalan, who is a political analyst at the Doha Institute. And joining us from Washington, D.C., Mark Kimmitt, who was a former US Assistant Secretary of State and a retired US Army Brigadier General. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Marwan, we've got so much to discuss. I'm going to start with you first. So, Turkish President Erdogan said that this operation was imminent. It could start at any moment. Now he's saying we're willing to delay, to let the United States withdraw. What kind of diplomatic wrangling would have to have gone on behind the scenes for both sides to have come to these agreements and this change of tact?
I think the announcement by the US President that he is withdrawing his forces from Syria must have taken almost everybody off guard, including members of his own administration. So I think Turkey and almost all the other players, they really need some time in order to understand the implications, the consequences of such a dramatic change in US policy in Syria. Probably we'll see more clarification by Turkey or by the United States also about what that means actually for almost everybody. So I think we need sometimes, everybody needs sometimes in order to understand that.
To digest it. Diplomatically, does it show that Turkey and the United States, that we've maybe mended the diplomatic relations there a little bit because they were strained for a while, or has this restrained relationships?
Well, I think relationship has improved over the past couple of months, in fact, and I think the Americans now, everybody understands that the Americans might be now abandoning their allies in Syria. I'm talking here about the YPG. That should come as good news for Turkey, because Turkey has been over the past actually few years asking the United States to stop actually supporting, financing and training those fighters, because Turkey, as you know, considered them to be terrorist elements. So I think this should, in my opinion, improve the relationship rather than strain the relationship between the two countries.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you bring up the YPG because, Selim, that's what I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
Does this delay, though, just give the YPG more time to dig in to northern Syria? We've seen them, you know, digging some trenches in recent days.
No.
Is this playing into their hands?
Primarily, Turkey was not bluffing. President Erdogan was not bluffing when he called last Friday and informed President Trump that the operation is imminent. That was not a bluff. It was just an ally-to-ally warning that, and it included a pledge and a suggestion that the U.S. soldiers it would be better for U.S. soldiers to stay where they are and not move too much. Now, this delay is just because the U.S. soldiers and the equipment started moving in the area, and there's too much chaos and too many moving targets at this point. Not longer, Turkey is going to move in again, Turkey has not indefinitely postponed it. And the reason Turkey was rushing or hurrying a bit was because it didn't want YPG to get any more deep-rooted than it has already been.
So if we are now delaying it perhaps until the new year, doesn't that allow them just to get themselves a little bit more established?
Not really, because they were totally depending on the U.S. support and U.S. logistics and U.S. umbrella. Now that umbrella is gone, and we have reports about France willing to take over, but I think that's just partly humor.
Marwan, what does all this mean in the broader sense of the Syrian war in general? I mean, what's Bashar al-Assad thinking about these latest developments?
The vacuum that is going to be created by the U.S. announcement, the withdrawal of the troops, is likely actually to increase the competition, because Turkey here is not the only actor. This is why I believe that the Turks, they want perhaps more time in order to understand the implications for the other actors also in Syria, because you have Russia, you have Iran, and of course, I mean, you have ISIL. So I think we still need to see how that is going to impact the strategy and policies of all these actors. I believe that we are going to see perhaps more competition. We have heard over the past, few hours that the Syrian regime forces are trying also to take advantage of this U.S. Decision by coordinating perhaps more with the YPG. And we know for sure that the YPG, there is some coordination between the YPG and the Syrian regime. They have actually maintained the relationship with the Syrian regime over the past years, and they have already handed over some of the territories, especially in the northern countryside of Aleppo. So we still need actually to see how the other actors on the Syrian territories are going to react to the U.S. reaction. But for sure, that will increase the competition. The vacuum, the withdrawal of the U.S. forces is going to be open new opportunities for other actors also to come into the fray.
Mark Kimmitt joining us from our Washington, D.C. studio. I'm going to welcome you into our discussion now. When President Trump announced that the US troops were pulling out, he said, "Job's done. We've defeated Daesh. They're no more of a problem to us." Before I ask you a question, I just want you to take a little listen to a bit of the video message he sent out when he had made this announcement.
We've been fighting for a long time in Syria. I've been president for almost 2 years, and we've really stepped it up. And we have won against ISIS. We've beaten them, and we've beaten them badly. We've taken back the land, and now it's time for our troops to come back home.
How dangerous is it, Mark Kimmitt, to assume that Daesh is defeated and they no longer pose a threat?
Well, I think, first of all, let's address some of the earlier points that were made. The fact that this announcement was made, the timing may have been a shock, but the fact that the president made the decision should come as a shock to nobody. He has been saying this since he was on the campaign trail, that he was going to get the U.S. out of these types of wars. Number two, the suggestion that President Erdogan was not bluffing about the attack into northeastern Syria was further complimented on the American side when the Americans said, if you do that, we will take the appropriate measure of force protection. So to prevent a NATO-on-NATO conflict, I think both sides made the decision that perhaps we could find a middle ground, which is for the United States to pull out, which is the right time to do it, and Turkey at that point could wait for 30 days before they come into a part of northeastern Syria. Daesh is not defeated, there's no doubt about that, in terms of the overall capability to conduct small-scale operations. But they are defeated for the United States. The United States does not have an existential threat in ISIS. That's for somebody else to finish off the job. The United States doesn't need to be there for another 15 years, destroying Daesh, setting up local forces, participating in peacekeeping missions. That's for somebody else to do, and that's the way that President Trump believes it needs to be done. But to address the point about America leaving and creating a vacuum, nothing could be further from the truth. We are setting up the model in Syria the way we set the model up in Iraq, which is we will provide air support, logistic support, we'll provide training and equipping, but the local forces will do the fighting. It has worked successfully inside of Iraq. It is the Iraq soldiers, the Iraq local forces, the Iraq militias that have destroyed ISIS inside of Iraq. We're going to apply the same method in Syria as we did in Iraq by providing tremendous amounts of air support and logistics. So the American ground forces, which Ambassador Jeffrey said weren't really important on the ground, will be removed, but we're still going to be involved. And any force that somehow thinks that there will be a security vacuum created by the United States needs to look up in the sky, because they're still going to be seeing F-16s up there.
And so you're saying then that the responsibility for fighting Daesh won't now fall solely on, say, Turkey's shoulders. The President Erdogan has said while that they are waiting for the US to withdraw, Turkey will work on plans to eliminate remaining Daesh elements in the region. So are you saying that the US isn't just going to wash its hands of this?
No, I don't think so. Listen, we don't care who kills Daesh. We encourage as many countries that feel threatened by Daesh to go after them in Syria. Whether that's the Turkish forces, we'll be behind them. Whether that's the Russian forces, whether that's in fact Bashar al-Assad's forces. We're agnostic on who does the killing. We just want to see them completely destroyed and no longer a threat to the United States, which they no longer are, but also to our allies in the region, particularly Turkey. So we will support Turkey anytime it goes after Daesh, and we'll thank you and we'll thank the Turkish military and be grateful for their fighting of Daesh.
When the US troops do withdraw, does that leave the future of Syria then more in the hands of countries, say, like Iran and Russia?
Absolutely. The United States' role in Syria was already limited, in fact, because the Americans, they choose actually not to take their leading role in Syria since the very beginning of the Syrian conflict in 2011. And now by withdrawing, I believe that role is going to be even more limited than it was before. Don't forget that the US, we thought actually early in the year that the United States has reached a strategy after all for Syria. If you remember, Rex Tillerson, the former Secretary of State, he made that very famous speech in the Hoover Institution in Stanford University in January 2018, when he said that we have 4 major objectives for staying in Syria, militarily staying in Syria. Number 1 is to defeat ISIL completely. Number 2 is actually to contain Iran and deny Iran the possibility of having this land corridor from Iran, Iraq, Syria into Lebanon and the Mediterranean. And number 3 is to ensure that is a successful political process in Syria that would end up actually with a new government other than Bashar al-Assad government, and the return of the refugees. So now actually we don't know if that strategy is still standing after the withdrawal of the US forces. To me, it seems that President Trump has just dumped all that actually and decided to leave Syria just like that.
All right, well, let's put that question to DC, to you, Mark Kimmitt. The future of Syria, is that now more in the hands of Iran? And what does that mean for Iran's power, broadly speaking, in the region? Does this open the doors for more Iranian influence, which the United States has always opposed?
Well, I would note that that Hoover speech, which Marwan referred to, is precise, and he's exactly right. Those were the tenets of the policy put out by Secretary Tillerson, assisted by General McMaster. It's not coincidental that both of them are gone. John Bolton is the National Security Advisor. Mike Pompeo is Secretary of State. So you're right, that policy is out the window, primarily because it never was the policy of the United States. The only legitimate, authorized reason for the United States to be in Syria was to defeat Daesh. Now, all of these other additional missions, I think, started looking like mission creep to the president, and he said enough is enough, particularly after he talked to President Erdogan. The Americans were talking about being part of the political process, training and equipping 40,000 local police. If there had been a political settlement, inevitably there would be peacekeeping forces, and the United States would be part of that. I don't think that President Trump envisioned that Syria, which has already gone longer than World War II, would become another one of our forever wars. That's against what he has said on the campaign trail. And so I think at this point, we never wanted to be part of the civil war, and it doesn't look like we will be. I think the real power players now in Syria will be Iran and Russia and Turkey. But I think Iran's role inside a post-conflict Syria will be significantly diminished, not because of the United States, but because of Israel. The Israeli policy is quite clear there. So, what do I see in 2 years from now? Perhaps a settlement, significant influence by the Turkish government, somewhat influenced by the Russians. UN will be in charge. Iranians will be diminished in their capability, and the United States will be grateful for all their contributions.
Well, there is a lot of developments and still many more to come, I'm sure. Gentlemen, thank you so much for helping us break this down. And I also appreciate you in our DC studio, Mark Kimmitt, in our studio in Istanbul, Selim Atalay and Marwan Kabalan. Thank you, gentlemen.